Hello. Welcome everyone as day 4 of the Linking Your Thinking conference continues. How's it going, Nicole?
I'm doing really well. How are you? And how's everybody else?
Well, I'm doing well, and judging from the enthusiasm, everyone else is also doing quite well too. Let me give you a quick introduction and why you're here. So, Nicole is somebody who I stumbled upon because of your excellent YouTube videos. And the more I was watching and learning from that, I really appreciated this sort of vast experience set that you were bringing in. Sometimes it was Dungeons and Dragons. Sometimes it had to do with data view. Sometimes it was more broad on just note health in general. And then, as we can see from some of the things that you shared about you in your bio, that's because probably you've lived in a lot of different places from the Philippines, the US, Australia, all the way to the Netherlands, picking up all those languages, working in software, and now working as a developer advocate for a company. It's giving, I love interacting with people like that because this broad skill set allows your linked knowledge to really come alive, and we can see that, and it generally means it's really fun to interact with you. so
That's awesome.
yeah, I mean, it's just the way it is. Thank you for being you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to see what people say.
Totally.
Just
And
looking
so,
forward to sharing what I've got here. But yeah, I think that you hit it on you hit the nail on the head for sure. I do love like different experiences, and my day job sounds like it's very techy, but it's actually just learning how to do things and then telling people how I learned it. So I think there's a lot of overlap there.
it absolutely there is. And so with today, apparently you'll be showing us why learning in public is the best way to learn, how to identify topics you've written about that are ripe for plucking, and how to move ideas through the content creation pipeline, production line. So yeah, I would say with that, take it away, Nicole.
Great. Let me share my screen. Okay. Hi everyone. As Nick said, I'm Nicole van der Hoeven. I am a developer advocate. I currently live in Maastricht in the Netherlands, although I'm working on changing that really, really soon. And I'm here to talk to you about what the heck to do with all the notes you probably already have. I'm hoping that it's not just me that has this problem. I'm going to leave some time for questions at the end, so keep that in mind as we go and write down your questions, and I'll try to get through as many as I can. First, I'm going to talk a bit about the theory that I live by when I'm taking and using my notes. And then in the last 3 topics, I'm going to be showing you live my real Obsidian vault, and I hope I don't reveal inadvertently any personal information. I'll talk about how I identify topics to create content about different kinds of content as well. The plugins that I use to move work from conceptual to done, and also how to weave content back into my notes. So this is going to be all about how to make notes actually useful. But first, let's talk about why they might not already be useful. This is my problem. More specifically, this is a snapshot of my Obsidian graph representing the 5,788 notes now that I have in my main vault from a few days ago. So the yellow ones represent the notes on role-playing games that I play, and the bits of sign that you see here and there are other people's words that I've highlighted and imported into my own vault. And then pink is just sort of everything else. So this is a lot of work and a lot of effort for sure. And the last thing that I want is for all of this to be in vain and for it to all be a grand exercise in how to hoard information. Like, I don't need that. Whether I see this as an actual problem for me is dependent on what I've done with all of it. So here's a roundup of what I created in 2021 using these notes. I wrote 15 blog posts on different subjects. I spoke publicly at 17 conferences and meetups. This was a fun one called Schrodinger's Pokemon. I produce 61 videos across multiple channels, and I do all of it myself. There's no team, there's me. And I made 6,393 Git commits according to GitHub. That's including the commits to my own vault, because I keep my Obsidian vault in a GitHub repository as well. So I'm not saying this to toot my own horn or anything. I'm just saying that it is possible to create this content and not be an expert in everything that I've spoken about. Some people think that when you talk about something, you have to be an expert. I wish I were. I never feel like I'm an expert in anything. The reality is that I just found a way to use my notes. Let's go over reasons not to make stuff. These are the things that keep us from publishing, especially me. First, we already kind of talked about this. I'm not an expert. Why would people listen to me anyway? This is definitely the imposter syndrome calling. Behind this panic and nagging doubt that people are going to realize that I'm a fraud is a more basic fear. I'm going to look like an idiot. And this is something that holds us adults back a lot. And then there's the question of purpose. There's this idea that before you even create a bit of content, you need to have the end goal. I know I'm guilty of this. I'm always like, oh, should I start a YouTube channel? Well, what is my niche? As if I could ever really figure out how things are going to go a few years down the track before I even publish anything. Sometimes these fears really just get in the way. And lastly, it's not polished enough. I always think, oh, it's not perfect. But you know what? It never actually is. And I keep thinking in a few more months, I'll be ready to share it. But if I just think like that, then I would never share anything. And these are all perfectly natural doubts to have, and ones that I still have from time to time. But I did come across an idea that made it easier, and I want to share it with you all. Learn in public. I changed my attitude from publishing just what's finished or perfect, however I define that, to just learning in public. It's a lot less pressure. I'm by no means the first to say it. This isn't something I came up with. It just clicked for me that there were a few thinkers that I was reading or listening to that were saying the same thing. For example, Andy Matushak in his public notes talks about the value of working with the garage door up, meaning letting people see the process of creation rather than just a finished product. Business tycoon and content creator Gary Vaynerchuk famously says that we all have a story. So if we just documented our lives and our stories, rather than trying to create something entirely new, the genuineness would reach a lot more people and help a lot more people. And then Austin Kleon's book, Show Your Work, explains that this has professional benefits as well. Publishing even unfinished work provides more professional and social proof than just a few lines of your CV. Sean Wang, who is also a developer advocate, says that thinking of public work as kind of a learning exhaust, meaning as byproducts of learning, rather than the end goal of learning, is one of the keys to having a successful coding career. So if we go back to this previous slide and we look at them in terms of learning in public, we see that learning in public addresses them all. First, I'm not an expert. Great, you don't have to be. Even if you're just a few steps ahead, you're still ahead of some people, and you can help people get to where you are. The key thing is to be genuine about it. Don't say that you're an expert when you're just a few steps ahead. But if you're open about that, people will still find value in what you're saying in your own journey. I'm going to look like an idiot? Well, probably to someone. Nick was saying earlier that I love to learn languages, and it is an infamous language learning myth that kids learn languages faster than adults because they're smarter. They're not smarter. They learn languages faster because they don't let fear of seeming silly hold them back. It's constant learning with no ego. That's their superpower. And what is this for? Well, the thought that we could ever foresee where learning a topic might take us is sheer hubris. For example, I learned this small language that nobody spoke and I had no use for. And about 5 years later, I'm living in the Netherlands. I have my career because I chose to learn this, for me, obscure language that had no meaning. How could I possibly have foreseen that? And it's not polished enough. Maybe so, but that's what makes it fascinating to watch. I love this behind the scenes stuff. A lot of people do. And that's because it's real. And it's the realness of public work that is compelling. So learning in public is the way to go. But I still want to give you a concrete example. Let's pretend that I'm creating a presentation, which is a form of content. It's hypothetically titled, Use It or Lose It, What to Do with All These Notes. So now for the practical part. I'm going to share some concrete steps for how I made this presentation from like all of the ideas that I had already in my vault. This is going to be a bit meta, and I'm going to take it all the way through to actually creating this presentation. So the first step is to take notes only about the things that interest you. And this is what I did, because I find that if I take notes about things that I don't actually find interesting, it's pretty obvious to everybody. And it's obvious to me because I end up thinking it's so boring and so tedious that I never complete it. So I keep track of content that I consume using some automated services, but it's always on things that I find interesting. So let's go over to my Obsidian vault here. I have the search panel up here, and right now I have this tag TVZ. I should really change that because I keep having to explain what it is. It means to verseteln, which means to process. In my head, that's how I think of it, but you could use like inbox or something. This is a tag that I use for everything that comes in that hasn't been processed yet. And a lot of that is articles or podcasts or even videos or books. And all of those things I use Readwise for. This is not a plug for Readwise, but I do use them, have been using them for years. And everything here, it has been automatically imported through them. So I'm not going to go into Readwise exactly, but I will show you the notes that I took that led me to this presentation inadvertently. So let's look at this Kanban note. Let me just get that out of the way. Okay, so we'll see some metadata here, and these are all put in when they're imported by Readwise. And here's that TVZ tag that I said is something that I use as a flag to remind myself this hasn't been processed. Now, I actually had processed this. I just unticked it for this presentation. And I was taking notes about the Kanban methodology. This is not actually from software. It's from Toyota. It's a manufacturing methodology, but it has been co-opted by software engineers all over. And you've probably seen this in the form of the sticky notes that are in columns. And I was doing some research on it for my work, my day job. And what particularly struck me are these things that I highlighted. So this isn't the entire article. I never import the entire article. I just import the things that I highlighted. And then after that, I open it in Obsidian and I look at things like, what about these WIP is work in progress limits? Apparently, and I've used Kanban in professional settings before, but I had never thought of work in progress limits as being all that important. But apparently it's part of the official Kanban methodology to have a limit for the number of items that you even have in your Kanban board, which I had never done. So my Kanban board just looked like a whole mess of stuff. So that was something that I took from that. I'm going to show you something else that's entirely different. This is a book, a Kindle book. I read almost exclusively on the Kindle now. This is a fictional fantasy book, part of a series by Piers Anthony called Santh. I had reread it last year, and I took fewer notes. One thing that stuck out to me was that there's this character named Crombie, and everybody in this magical world has a talent, sometimes really silly, sometimes really powerful. Crombie's magical talent is that if someone asks him the direction to somewhere, he can point with 100% accuracy, but he doesn't know where it is. Like it could be something that's directly in front of his finger. It could be thousands of miles away, but in that direction. So he never knows the destination. And I thought that that was really interesting. And it wasn't anything to do with the actual book, really. So I made this note called "The direction is more important than the destination." And when I did it, I made it last year, haven't updated it since, and I related it to creator's block because sometimes, like I was saying about trying to see what the purpose is for the ultimate purpose of a piece of content is actually really difficult, and maybe it's just something that's going to hold you back. So I really like this idea of the direction and the progress, the little steps being more important than the destination. I'm going to show you one more seemingly disparate thing, and it is an article about D&D. This is from someone named Sly Flourish, and he had this idea of lightning rods. Now, he talked about it in the context of a lightning rod being something that brings in that kind of attracts a certain behavior. And in that case, it was certain characters' powerful abilities. But I started thinking of this in the context of PKM in general and creating content. And so I started thinking of this idea that a lightning rod of thought could be something that attracts, so like an idea cluster. A lightning rod is an idea that is so attractive and relevant to you that you can't help but form other ideas around it. So the key thing about all of this that I'm showing you, all of those seemingly disparate notes, is that I definitely didn't take them thinking, I'm going to make a presentation for Nick in Linking Your Thinking. I had no idea it was going to happen. I was just following my interest. That's why you get D&D and software engineering and fantasy fiction, because those are the kinds of things that I like. I let my curiosity guide my notes. The second step is the lightning rods. Sounds familiar because I actually took it from that. And I mentioned that it's kind of like an idea cluster. The problem is how to identify them, because if you've been taking enough notes for a while, you're going to have them. It's just a question of how to actually find them when you maybe didn't structure your notes well. Obviously, if you've been following Nick Milo, then maybe you have like nice and organized maps of content. I try to do that. I fail most of the time. So here's what I do instead. There are 4 different techniques that I was thinking of that help me identify them. And that's bottom up, top down, outside in, and chaos. And we're going to go through all of these in detail. So in terms of bottom up, that's kind of what you're probably more familiar with from Light School and everything that Nick does. But this is an approach where you have all of these notes and then you start to build a foundation and start to find commonalities between them, and then you organize them. But the way that I actually find these things, so we'll do bottom up for now. You've probably already heard of the Obsidian graph view. That's the cool thing. I think that Nick was showing it in the introduction, like before the webinar. And that's really good, but it can be quickly overwhelming. So what I actually end up doing a lot of the time is a local graph view. So for example, I identified this topic, productivity, because I know I'm interested in it and I've written and created a lot of content about it. So what I like to do is I'm using the command pane, so that's Command P or Control P if you're on Windows or Linux. And then I would type in local graph view, click on that, and it opens it up here. Now the cool thing about this is that it only takes into account the notes around productivity in particular. So not everything in your vault. And that's really cool because it lets you have a filter, like a more granular filter of what people are actually going to be able to see. And another thing that I like to do is to hit this filter here and change up the depth. So this is only showing the notes that are immediately linked to productivity. But what if it wasn't directly linked and it was linked to something else that was here? So I like to vary this depending on how granular I want to get. And suddenly, let me remove this. It's way bigger, right? There's a way bigger scope, but still smaller than my notes because you can see I have 5,785 notes. And also, I really like that there are these red things here, and those are the ones that I have linked to for some reason, but they don't exist yet. I haven't written anything about them. And one thing that I like to do is start with those and try and see like why haven't I written about implementations of Agile, but I've linked to it. Sometimes they're things that I've imported from Readwise, right? Or like this concept of a miracle morning, which I know about, but I just haven't written about. So this is a good way to see what's missing, and just kind of exploring it, I find to be a very useful way of figuring out what to write about or what to create stuff about. There's also search. I was already in the search pane. Here I was searching for a tag, but I could, if I had keywords in mind, I could look for that. I'm going to show you this briefly. I don't want to get into data view right now. Oops. But I do want to show you some things that you can do with it. For example, I have notes by the number of outgoing links, because I figured that these are the notes that perhaps I should be writing about, or I might need to make maps of content or something, but I haven't yet. So it's really cool because with data view, I'll just briefly show you the query, but I'm scared because like it can be kind of daunting. So there's a bunch of things that I'm filtering out, but I go down this list and then I see like some of these, whatever sticks out to me. So that's bottom up. If we go to top down, that's kind of like projects that you've been assigned. So this presentation is a mix of these first three because there's an element of me just already having these notes. And there's also an element of Nick being the instigator, and he was the one that chose among three topics that I brought to him. And then there's also an element of it coming from other people. But top down is kind of like when you're assigned a project at work and you don't really have a choice. Maybe it's like an entirely new topic, right? But you still have to go on ahead with it. And outside in, I mentioned that it's about other people. And the way that I do it is when I get feedback on something or questions or even like comments on other people's videos that I think were interesting, or questions especially, I tag it with feedback. So if I open up my tags pane here, I have a tag specifically for NVDH, that's me, feedback, and then I categorize that feedback. So here's how it works. Let's say I have a new note here. Here is some feedback. I would then go and tag it with feedback, and maybe this is about a plugin. This is actually about the quick add plugin for Obsidian. Now, when I look here, I can see everything that people said. Or I don't put everything that people said. Like if they just say, oh, this is cool, I probably won't put it in here. But if they say, oh, this is cool, but I was kind of hoping you would talk about this, that's the kind of thing that gets on here. And it is difficult, it takes time, so I'm a little bit behind, but it does give me some idea of what to write about. So for example, let me bring up my notes for this presentation, this task. I started, well, this is the abstract, but this is some research. So I told you about identifying some things. This is the bottom-up approach. I embedded this image of productivity. It's a local graph. And then I don't know if people do this, but people know this, but in Obsidian, this is not a plugin. This is just native Obsidian functionality. You can embed queries. And this is just one tag that happened to be about creating, feedback for creating in particular. And then this one is about feedback for processing in particular. And this is what you would get here if you were searching there, but I wanted it embedded in this note. So then I'm looking through all of these things that people have given me in public forums, so it's all okay to show. But if I create content that is around these topics, then I can say like, oh, this person wants to know about creating content after reading books and watching videos, or, my note-taking flow. And then I can try to address these specific points. This is outside in. Now, I don't suggest that you absolutely follow what other people say. They also have to match your interests, right? But if they do match, then I think that's an easy win. And then the last one is chaos. It is provocatively named, but it's one of two plugins. And by the way, I'm going to have a slide with all of the plugins that I mentioned, so you don't have to take notes along the way. Or, unless you can. This is a note-taking conference after all. But I have Obsidian Smart Random Note, which is a community plugin. Now, once it's installed, you're going to have this icon here for opening a random note across your entire vault. Since this is live and this is my real private vault, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to open up the command pane and do one of the other things that it can do, which is you can either open a tagged random note or you can open a random note from search. So I'm just going to do that because I was already searching on the TVZ tag. So let me get rid of some of these things. And it opened up this COVID paper. This is a white paper. This is something that I was just randomly interested in, but it is about pandemic modeling. So this is really cool, especially in conjunction with daily notes, because if I quickly show you my daily note template, and right now this is using the templates plugin, which is the core plugin in Obsidian. This is what my daily note looks like. Change it for what works for you. I actually have this syntax for the dice roller. Now, I tend to use the Obsidian dice roller a lot. I installed it. It's a community plugin, but I installed it because it's great for D&D or any RPG. But I also think that an underappreciated feature of it is that it can randomize across notes too. So let me go to just a new note, and I'm going to put that in, and this says it wants to randomly select something with a TVZ tag and then display the link. So switching over to the preview mode here, then this is returning a book pulled in through Readwise as well by Scott Burkham. And if I don't like it, then I can change it. Now, this is a meeting, don't go into that. This is another article. So you see that having this on my daily note is like a prompt for me to maybe try and process some of these things. And it could be a prompt to think about how this relates to whatever it is that I'm working on. That works more often than I would have thought. So that is chaos. These are the different ways to figure out where these idea clusters are. The third step is releasing the Kanban board, and it is actually making stuff in whatever form that takes. I'm going to show you about how I made this presentation. For that, you're going to need a Kanban plugin. Now, I already have it installed, and there aren't that many settings that you need to set up for it in settings. this is my content board. And if you haven't seen a Kanban board before, each of these columns is like a state. So at the very left here is on deck. And you'll notice that each of these has a number within parentheses. That's because I learned in that article how important work in progress limits are. So for things like editing, I do not want this to get above 3. And if I do, then there's just going to be so much work to edit them. And knowing myself, I'm just going to put it off and then never do it. So I start with on deck. These are items that I decide, they're kind of like at the back of my mind. These are the things that I'm most going to be likely to pick from when creating content. So these are things that I've decided that I actually need to work on. Then I can start scripting for it. And look, here is this presentation. But looking through here, there's also editing for videos or writing. This also is for code, like if I need it to be reviewed by somebody. This is for captioning and for scheduling. These are mainly for YouTube. And then post-publishing and done. But it's never really done. I'll talk more about that later. So Kanban is cool because you can do something like new note. Then you go here and you click new note from card. And you have a brand new task of whatever it is. And if you open up the command pane, you can insert a template. I've created templates for my most common use cases. So let's say that this is let's say it's a presentation like this one. So this is I'll talk about this later, but these are the things that I usually need for presentations, like details about the talk, abstract structure, and then the presentation itself. And then from here, you can move things from one tag to another, one column to another, and that's how I got this presentation here. Now, I really also like that this post-publishing thing for videos is also a checklist, because if you ever tried to create a video, there's a lot of steps that you need to remember. What I do is I have them all as a checklist. So for example, there's pre-production and post-production. These are all of the things that I always forget, like creating captions or taking a thumbnail photo and whatnot. So having this is a way to systematize this entire process. This is what Kanban is about. This is what it's good for. It's about distilling all of the work that goes into different bits of content and putting it in a format so that you don't even have to think about it. It's just a matter of a checklist and following instructions, and you can see clearly where you are at any point. This is also good for work. Like if you show your manager this, it's very easy to see what's not being worked on and what is being worked on. I'm going to show you something quickly, which is a little bit niche. I mentioned that I would talk about this. This is a plugin called Fantasy Calendar. You're seeing a theme here. It's RPG plugins. RPG stands for role-playing games, by the way. But there's a theme of them being repurposed for non-game purposes. And in this case, I use it as a content calendar. So Fantasy Calendar adds a different calendar here. It's not just for fantasy worlds. This is just like the real world. You can switch calendars. Now those are my other calendars, and this is the content one. And each of these dots is a bit of work, one of those cards, and I can hover over them and see what I was talking about. This is a video. And I also can bring up a bigger version of that. I have a hotkey for it, but it comes with a fantasy calendar. And this is what that looks like. And you have a monthly view, and you can even color code it. So it's easy to see if you have different kinds of projects, you can kind of track the streams that way. After the last step, before done anyway, is post-publishing. And the biggest thing that I don't do, or the biggest bottleneck, is tying it back in. I really noticed that when I create a video, I have a tendency to think, okay, well, that's done, and I never put it back into my vault. But there are things that I learned when making the video, so I feel like that should be tied back into my vault. So that's what I'm doing now. So if you look at, like, I made a video about top 10 Obsidian plugins. I now have a video database where I have the video, I have the timestamps, I have the transcript if I need to search it. It's more for searching purposes. And then I also identify what it's related to. But I went the extra step of going through plugins, for example, and I embedded this. And by the way, this is an iframe. And I just put the link to YouTube here, and you can even have it start at a certain point during the video, like a timestamped point. And in this way, you're not just leaving your work to languish. This is breathing work that is changing all the time, that gets updated when you produce something on it and when you learn something new. And I also wanted to say, this presentation was made in Obsidian using the Advanced Slides plugin. So when we talk about creating content, this definitely completes the loop. So let me show you that. It's in a separate one. I had a task for it, but I also had a presentation for it. And so what I like to do when I'm actually creating the presentation is I have the task here where I have, here I have like bullet points of what kind of main points that I want to hit, but just a few points. And then I work off of the one here on the left, which is the actual slides. This is using the Advanced Slides plugin. There is a Slides plugin that is a core one. The one that I prefer is a community plugin called Advanced Slides, because you can just do a bunch more, like, you know, changing the theme and whatnot. But it is basically built around the thought that really presentations and notes are the same thing, just one is meant to be public by nature. And you only need to do these 3 dashes and it creates a slide. So I'm opening up the command pane again and I'm going to select show slide preview. And then it's a little bit awkward here because my zoom controls are in the way, so I'm not really sure how to fix that. But in here, like this is what I want to do. I want to be able to change the slide preview. I wonder if I can just, yeah, okay, that's better. It's really awkward with all of the zoom controls there. So now it's in the right format and I can, you know, move it along. This is exactly what I was talking about earlier. And just to show that this is live, let me put something here. And now at the very beginning, there's another slide. So once you make the transition of using just text for presentations, it's so much easier to create presentations because they're just notes. You can copy things, even images, into this presentation as well. So this all goes back to the concept of continuous integration or continuous deployment, which is in software engineering. It's often abbreviated to CI/CD. And the main idea is that the process doesn't or shouldn't end when software is released and deployed, because it should still be monitored after that. It would be not a great company if they just released things and then just said, oh, well, that's done now. I mean, ideally, they would listen to people and feedback should be gathered from customers, and then that information goes right back into their planning for the next period, and it goes into improving the product. This is the ideal. We should look at our notes in the same way, because done shouldn't mean done forever. It should just mean that when you get the feedback back about what's out there and what people think, that feedback then goes into the next cycle or the next time that it becomes a lightning rod, just like any other idea. So wrapping up now. Here's a wrap up. Learning in public is one of the best and most sustainable ways to not just use your notes, but to genuinely improve yourself by learning something new. If we let curiosity guide our notes and then take notes only on things that we're interested in instead of what we think we should be interested in, then we can filter out everything we're not excited about, reduce noise, and actually have stand a chance at tackling our TVZ piles or our inboxes. We can also look for lightning rods of thought by going bottom up, top down, outside in, or using the randomness of chaos. And then we can use the Kanban system as a content production line to improve consistency and clarity. But actually, there's kind of a step 4, right? But it is continuous integration, so I didn't feel like it should be a step because it really isn't linear. It is continuous. Continuous integration is about listening to and recording feedback and putting it right back into our vaults to improve our understanding at a later date. And on that note, does anyone have any questions? As promised, here are my links. This is YouTube. This is my site. I think Dan is going to post them in the chat. You can hit me up on Twitter. This might be interesting. I learn in public. I publish most of my Obsidian notes using Obsidian Publish. This is my vault. So be warned, it's messy. It's for me. But if you're okay with that, then welcome and have a look around. This is read-wise because I just love them. I'm such a fangirl of them. And as promised, here are all of the plugins that I mentioned. You by no means have to install and enable all of these to be productive, but this is just me sharing my setup. So yeah, I'm gonna try to get my camera up and running, but I'd love to hear any questions if there are any.
Nicole, the camera's back. We see you now. Oh, now we don't.
Oh, you say that as like I thought
Okay,
that
we
I
see you
was
again.
okay, great.
It came back at some point. I'm not sure. I thought maybe you just
I
did
did.
something magical, but okay.
I just looked at it and that was magical enough.
No, it
Apparently,
had
I don't
to
know.
snap into shape.
Yeah.
This is great. So in the chat, Dan has been throwing in links. Thank you, Dan. I do want to take a moment, if you haven't already, to type out a takeaway in the chat. That is how we give claps to our presenter, is by sharing what we've taken away from what they've presented. So we can kind of see some things hopefully populate in the chat, and then we'll be going into questions and answer. Learn in
Controlled
public.
randomness. Yes.
I really like the continuous integration. Anytime that there's a complete system, something that's looping or cycling, then I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
this is good, because then we can continue figuring it out.
Yeah, and by the way, this is the benefit of Obsidian, right? Because I would have never thought to relate continuous integration with PKM. Like they seem really unrelated, but it just comes up and it makes me try to make those connections. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Some wonderful takeaways in here. I know Dan sent a link too. If you're somebody who is on Twitter, you just click that link and it will automatically at Nicole and reference Nicole's handle. So maybe you can share that one again. But these are some really great takeaways. Love the idea that ideas come from everywhere.
Yeah. I like this dog fooding your ideas. Yes, absolutely. I was afraid of this, a presentation about the presentation creation process. I thought it might be a bit meta.
No, it was really good, Nicole. And just to reiterate on what you said, you showed us a lot, especially near the end, and that's intentional. We kind of want to wrap up the level of difficulty. That was our intention. I think, Nicole, you hit that nicely. For the people who are new, recognize that and say, okay, I'm a little bit earlier on my journey. I might not have to, go with all these plugins, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I'm in tech, so I love trying out these things, but I don't think that you need to have any of these plugins to be able to create a second brain in Obsidian at all. I think it's just up to your skill. Like if you think something's too complicated, don't use it. It has to be fun for you as well, right?
Absolutely. All right, questions. So I'm not sure if you can see them, but I can
I
read
can
off.
see them.
Okay, you can pick and choose. Let me know if you want any help on any of these. You want
Sure,
you want
I'm
me to read them off
Christian.
or Okay, you got it?
No, I can do it. Christian Stenner. When you start bottom up with very basic notes, no meta, structure, etc., how do you integrate those old notes into a more elaborate system over time? Two ways. One is you there I've actually written this. One is the more complicated way. One is the simpler way that I wish I'd taken in hindsight. The more complicated way is to create scripts or use other people's scripts to programmatically change something, especially if you're migrating from one system to another. You can do that. I used Python. It is doable and I did it and it's all there and it works. However, I wish I had considered just not doing it because you always want to bring in everything that you had from previous systems. I myself came directly from Rome and before that Notion and before that Evernote. So there's always so much baggage that you bring with the notes. And you're saying about starting with very basic notes. I'd say don't force it. I'd say next time you think, oh, I really wish this note had that metadata, then add it because then it also becomes a good signal to you for what you are actually interested in and what you're not interested in. Like, for example, I used to have a map of content that I created top to bottom that was like exercise. And that's because I thought I should, and I still should, right? But I'm just not that interested in it. And I got, like put nothing in there. And maybe that's a good sign. So I deleted it because I'm obviously not that interested. So yeah, so that's my recommendation. Choose the easy route and only integrate as much as you absolutely need. Tony K, do you want me to just go through this, Nick?
Well, if we can always jump around because some might be a little bit too complex for what we want to do for during the question and answer.
Okay,
But if any of these
sure.
really seem like they fit, yeah.
For both programming and spoken languages, when you work with a bunch, do you have any tricks for organizing the intersection of shared concepts and multiple languages? Yes, use the aliases. I use that a lot. For example, I work in performance testing. I have notes, like let's say I have a note of performance testing. Well, in Spanish, that's pruebas de carga. So I have that as an alias because I consume content in both languages for that topic. And so I don't want to have two separate notes, one in Spanish, one in English. Since it's just for me, it's just like a hodgepodge of things. And I use aliases a lot. And I try to do that with most of these things. Some things, just because of the concept, I tend to think more about in one language than in the other, like about relationships. For me, that's like more Tagalog, which is my native language, and not English. So I think go with what makes sense to you and use aliases. You can also create maps of content, by the way. You can tag for different languages if you want to search for something in particular in a certain language. Um, Salamat, Dan. He was just complimenting me in the chat. Buti nandyan ka. Brian says, can you use a simple search on a topic that you want to write about and look at the notes that come up? And maybe try drawing a graph linking all those search results to find something new to write about. Yes, so I think I kind of showed how to use the Obsidian search to do it. And then once you look at those notes, you can also, especially if they're like, if it's based on a keyword or a tag, you can use the Obsidian graph view in here on the pane. I don't know if you want me to be demoing these, Nick, but you can have keywords. You can have like paths too. So I do that a lot for like my games, my role playing games. You can click this open graph settings. You can say you don't want certain paths. You can show tags, which right now I don't have. So yes, you can do it. And the answer is Obsidian Graph View, which is a core plugin. Emma Schmelzer. Apologies if this is a basic question. It's probably not. I'm very new to this world. Welcome, and have several piles of handwritten notes on my desk at the moment. I know they contain nuggets that are worth preserving, but I'm feeling totally overwhelmed about the best way to upload those into Obsidian. Do you think it would be wisest to prune as I go, i.e., follow my curiosity and only type up the things that interest me now, or should I type up everything as it is and process within Obsidian? Oh, it sounds like a lot. I love handwritten notes. I have an embarrassingly large collection of fountain pens, so I get you, Emma. I'm there with you. The reason that I didn't choose to upload everything is just that there's so much. And I initially decided that I would. I never ended up doing it. And it was actually stopping me from creating those notes. I'd go to create a note and then I'd say, oh, but I already wrote about this in my journal. Well, I'll just wait until I upload it. And I just never did. So I would say, go if you want to go digital, just create the digital notes. And then later, maybe you could just think of, instead of typing it up, snap a photo maybe of that page if you feel like it, and then put it in your note. I think we have to be realistic about our time and interest. We don't have to have everything. Yes, Barry says get a good OCR scanner. Yeah, definitely. But that also takes time, right? So it depends on you. Dave Meyer, what universal methodologies do you use for note taking or making that we can apply beyond Obsidian? I coming from software engineering, I am very big into tech, and agile methodologies have pretty much overtaken the tech world. I think that just the name, like agile, the idea of not being so bogged down in processes and being, something being robust enough to move quickly, adapt to changes, adapt to feedback. I love that, and I try to live by it. I also like flag theory. I made a video about it, but it's basically about living a multinational life and just embracing the fact that some of us don't feel entirely connected to just one country or just one culture. And I don't, just like in my notes, I don't think, well, I must only take notes about work stuff that I get paid for. No, if you see my graph, like most of it, slowly, the TTRPG stuff is catching up. Is that a waste of time? Well, maybe to other people. It's not to me. I mean, I play with family and friends, so I get so much out of it. And yeah, that's another methodology that I use in Obsidian and note taking and life in general. What Obsidian theme are you using? I believe this is a Sanctum, which I think was the Obsidian Gem of the Year, which is like awards that they have. It won the best theme of the year. It looks pretty sick in light mode as well. Not LYT, but LIGHT. Oh, Helen got it. Wow, good job, Helen, for recognizing my theme. That's awesome. Could you please share the Kanban article? Yes, Eric Armstrong got it. That is indeed from Atlassian, which, by the way, is a Melbourne company. Yay, I'm Australian too, so. Christian again, Kanban board for content creation. Do you share this with collaborators or how do you outsource? I have a similar setup in Trello, but would love to have it all in Obsidian. What's holding me back is the lack of collaboration features. Okay, so firstly, I don't outsource. It's like one of my main failings because everyone's like, you need to be smarter, you need to outsource. I don't have a team, I don't have anyone. I write, conceive, edit, produce, whatever, everything. And so I don't have that problem, but I do use Obsidian for work as well, for collaboration. So I'm not going to actually open it, but so you'll see like I have like this workshop one is for, I have blogs, internal docs. So the more markdown based repositories at work, I use in Obsidian because they are already GitHub repositories. So that's one idea. Use GitHub if you're familiar with that. If you're not, I share a vault with my players, with my D&D players, because I also DM, and it's really cool because I do it through Dropbox. I shared the Dropbox folder with them, and then the whole vault gets shared. Oh, this is actually the wrong D&D vault. But yeah, so if you use like iCloud or something else, you can do that as well. And all our session notes go here. And as I update things like handouts and whatnot, they go here. And it updates for everybody in real time. So that's something else that you might want to consider. I also heard that they now have collaboration in Obsidian Sync, which I have not tried yet, but look into that. Camille Ruque.
We'll do this
Can
last
I?
one, and then we'll kind of
Oh,
get to
sorry.
the end
Okay.
section, Nicole. Yeah, awesome.
Sure, sure. Sorry, I wasn't watching the time. Camille, can I call existing notes into a Kanban column using tags or even data view? Um, Data view, no. Unfortunately, that is not there yet. Using tags, I don't believe you can have tags. So something and then tag here. You can, oops, I think I accidentally selected agile, but yes, you can have that. And then when you click on the tag, it opens it up here. But I don't think you can use data view that way, unfortunately. Okay, I think you said that was, we needed to wrap up.
I just want to make sure that we have time again to share links where we can learn more about your work. I know you shared that on the
That does not
screen,
work.
and Dan shared a few links, but it might just be nice to see those one more time. There they are. Dan's
Oh,
thrown them in the
sure.
chat, and very cool.
Thank you everybody for being here. Hit me up on YouTube or Twitter if you have any questions.
Yeah, I just want to say again, thank you for coming here, Nicole, and sharing this wide spectrum of use cases that are all interlinked together. I think you gave us a lot to chew on too. There's just something magical about working in learning in public and
Yeah.
understanding this continuous process around it. And
Yeah.
man,
Thank
wow.
you for having me. Thank you for inviting me in the first place. It was very nerve-wracking to talk to you that first time, having seen you in all of your videos.
Yeah, it's kind of funny with the same background too. It's like, is this a
Yeah.
recording? Uh,
Yeah. Oh, am I in
but
a video?
yeah, yeah. No, yeah, it's been great to get to know you a little bit there, Nicole. And I think Dan had, did you want to add something?
Hello there, Nicole. Thank you so much. Look at the Q&A. We can save that and send it to you, and maybe you can share a video with the answer, and we can package that all together for everyone
Yes.
here. I think that would be nice. I just have to mention this because it's so cool. You inspired beginner Obsidian users here, and they're saying we want to form like this accountability group. So I think that's
Oh,
really,
that's
really
so
nice.
cool.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you
hi,
very
Layla.
much.
Saw someone from my accountability group, but a YouTube accountability group. So, yes to accountability groups. They're awesome.
Wonderful. All right. Well, last words to you, Nicole. Thank you so much. And then we'll share an outro music video for everyone.
All right. Thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your day.